You were one of the first, I think, security founders that I talked to that was actively engaging in using Copilot and then Cursor and then sort of really leaning into this technology. And so maybe it'd be great to first start off with sort of a discussion or just an understanding of kind of like, what has your experience been with vibe coding? Kind of what are you using it for? What have you observed? And then would love to talk about maybe the other side of the equation that we don't typically talk about so much, which is what are the issues that it's raising?
Yeah. Well, like most companies that I think are doing it right, we're embracing this stuff as fast as we can and putting it into the hands of our team, and folks are using it to write large parts of our applications today. Like you said, we were pretty early on in terms of like looking at these LLMs and like how we could use them in enterprise applications like Socket. When we got our hands on GPT-4, like that was the magical moment for us, was like, what can we do with this to go out and scan every open source package and have this like human-like intelligence doing this task that would have been, too much scale for like a human to handle. And then obviously all the way now through to like agents and agentic coding and all this stuff, like it's super, super powerful. There are the skeptics, there are the curmudgeons that are like, and I think this is true in every company. There's always some folks and certain use cases where it doesn't work the best today, but that's all going to get better, I think, long term. But, certain types of like writing certain manifest files like Kubernetes things, certain low-level code, we see it struggle. But by and large, I mean, in a JavaScript or a TypeScript application, it's just like super good. I mean, UI code, it does really, really well. So yeah, we're using this stuff as much as we can. But obviously, like as a security company, like the main concern that we have is like, okay, how do we make sure that we're actually writing secure code? And there's multiple dimensions on which you care about this. There's like the code itself that's generated, and making sure that people are not taking it for granted, like what comes out of these models. One of the things when you write code, it's similar like when you're in school and you're taking notes in class versus when you're just listening. You remember, you pay more attention when you're actually writing something yourself. And so one of the things we have seen is that when people use these tools, it's like easier to just kind of go with it and not like scrutinize every single line of code and every conditional and every piece of the code perfectly, like as if you were writing it yourself. Yeah. And so that's a big kind of scary thing for us is and I think like that's like one of the main challenges with these tools. And the other big one is third-party code that's being brought in by these tools, because they often will just like reach for dependencies and say, oh, you want to build a feature? I know how to do that. Let's npm install this and that and the other thing, and then that's how they get going. And then, how do you know that the code they're choosing is good, right?
I was helping my daughter with a project last night, and I did a panicked npm install last night, and it was like, oh wait, I don't know if we used the right library for that. Luckily, nothing got Trojan. But like, so I'm really curious. So like the sirens call for this stuff, and what we've consistently heard is that like engineers just become way more productive, and like I think. When Copilot came out, we heard that engineers were like 20% more productive. And I think over the last 2 years, we've now heard with things like Cursor, it's like 3x productivity. I'm curious, like, are you seeing that level of productivity with these tools? Is it that much more efficient for your engineering teams?
It's harder for me to say because like we were kind of native to this. I mean, I guess we started as a company in 2020, 2021 timeframe. I guess for things that are one-offs, like absolutely, it's like 10x. Yeah. It's actually way more than 3x. Yeah. Like if you just need a script to go and pull this data or that data, at least for me, like I find it's 10x because it'll one-shot it correctly. Yeah. So I'm doing something that would have taken me like 4 hours to write, or maybe 1 hour if I was really good or really fast. And it's going to do it in like, as long as it takes me to write the prompt and wait for the text to appear on the screen. Yeah. So that's really, really good. But then I think when you're dealing with like a larger code base and there's like a lot of things you got to get right, like system design, things like that. Yeah. That's when you end up having to work with it a lot more.
And I would say like, cause you are the pinnacle of engineer, not to flatter you, but just as a statement of fact.
Thank you.
You are a technical expert, and you are sort of the father of a lot of this stuff. You still review your code. You still spend a lot of time looking at the code that's generated, right? It's not the case where vibe coding to you isn't, hey, I'm going to just type a prompt in and like commit whatever comes out, right?
It's more like, I mean, it's the same way that probably a lot of people use ChatGPT for writing emails. Like you would never just send an email without reading it. I mean, like you would use it to like draft the first draft, and then you're going to go in and tweak some things, right? That's how like I'm using it. Gotcha. And I think a lot of the people on our team are using it that way. It's not, whereas I think that other use case where, like you just let it generate something and you run it without
Yeah.
even looking at it. Like that's the true vibe coding, right?
Yeah.
And like that, I do that sometimes. I kind of almost don't want to say it on camera because like it's not good.
It's
but
okay.
It's usually for
This is a
one-offs.
safe space.
It's for one-offs though. It's like
Yeah.
stuff where I know that code's I'm gonna use it once and I'm gonna throw it away.
Oh, totally.
So I don't really care as long as it's not gonna lead to me being owned in some way.
Yeah.
Like I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Like if I need to generate some sort of a script to find something in a
Mhm.
data set, right? And I'm running it locally and I don't
Mhm.
put any API keys, but
Exactly.
So it sounds like, I mean, it's really funny, right? Because I think we're seeing this sort of strange bimodal world emerge where like the most productive skilled people are more productive and more skilled.
hmm
And then on the other end of that barbell is like the least sort of knowledgeable in this space when using this stuff become perhaps the most destructive, right?
Mm.
Like it seems like there's a lack of guardrails possibly
Mhm.
like for folks, you know, even like myself where I did CS in college and I've done it before and I've always been horrible. But now I'm like, now it makes me good enough to be dangerous, right? I think that seems to be what's happening with some of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, you at least know, I mean, if you studied CS, you actually know like how to prompt it correctly and like describe what you want
One would
properly. Yeah. And you have some,
Yeah.
idea of like, but I think the point is a good point though. Like,
Yeah.
like somebody who, because that's the positive side of all this is that, okay, more people now are writing
Yeah,
code than ever
absolutely.
before. That's great. And a lot of those people are going to find their way into engineering in some way.
Yeah.
Like they're going to end up, like learning about software engineering and
Yeah.
like actually find this stuff fascinating. And their gateway is that, they were able to just like vibe code something. So, and then of course, like I think the more software in the world, the better. Like I think just people like being able to create bespoke apps for their own use
Yeah.
cases. Like this stuff is really, really exciting. But yeah, like to go into production like with a purely vibe coded app as a beginner that doesn't actually know how to assess like the design of the app,
Yeah.
like are you doing validation of the password like on the client side so that it doesn't do anything? Like are
Yeah.
they going to know that? Like
Yeah.
I mean,
Do you know what a client secret is?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think like that's where you get this sort of like I guess you get different takes on like what the future is.
Mm-hmm.
Some people think that the AI is going to get good enough that you can just like it's going to solve all these problems
Yeah.
eventually. It's going to be smart enough, and then others, think that it's never going to get to that level. And just like a human, where you always have code review, no matter how good, if you're like a god tier programmer, like
Yeah.
you still do code review because it's the right thing to do. It's the best practice, and even those people miss things, right?
Yeah.
Like, is it going to be more like that where I just hit the mic?
That's fine.
Is it going to be more like that
Yeah.
where you always need like guardrails, security checks, security
Totally.
tools, maybe other AIs assessing that AI, that type of stuff?
Well, when you talk to people that are really close to this stuff, and I mean like the PhD, the folks where it is actually rocket science, like they're mostly pretty adamant that the AI long term solves this. And I think just my casual looking over kind of the problems that we've seen emerge with this stuff, like you don't see a lot of SQL injections or cross-site scripting or cross-site requests for it. Like a lot of this stuff where if you had a bug bounty program, you got 50 of them a week. Like it seems like these classes of vulnerability are disappearing with this, but like it's sort of foregrounding a bunch of other vulnerabilities that are much more like DevOpsy, like key management or authorization stuff or weird race conditions with auth Z or auth N. Like I'm curious, is that kind of like what you've picked up or?
Yeah, for sure. I think with stuff like SQL injection, I mean, I would hesitate to say that like it's perfect at it, but where it's a matter of remembering rules, I think it's similar to like a really good human. If you're an experienced programmer, you'll remember these rules and apply them pretty consistently and generally avoid the mistakes. I think where you get more risk is like you said, key management. So with MCP servers, you see everyone's just putting these files on their system, like mcp.json or whatever, and they just contain all the tokens to everything, to their Gmail account.
Totally.
Because they want the power of hooking all this stuff together. But I think like in the design of a lot of this stuff, because it's been such a rush to get things to market and everybody wants to move quickly and be like part of this exciting movement, all good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not complaining. We're like part of it too. But there's this, this just sort of afterthought. Security is an afterthought, right? Like it was in all the other
It's always
rushes.
an afterthought.
Just like with cloud, right? Like
Yeah.
It's sort of like, okay, shoot, this thing got really big and it's really important. Now let's figure out how to bolt on security.
Security is always, security is always a concern when there is a potential impact.
When there's something to protect.
And there isn't an impact if no one's using it, right?
Yeah,
It's sort of, you can think of all the dead programming languages that were hyper secure, but nobody used them, so it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's true. Yeah.
And it just seems like with technology, like there's always going to be mistakes, and kind of our job is to I mean, we're trying to do bumper bowling, right? Like
Hmm.
keep people out of the gutter, try to get
Hmm.
people get a strike. It's kind of always been the role of security, but
But you got to worry when you just have like, MCP servers that are just random GitHub repositories that people are finding and
yeah.
cloning down. No one's reading that code. No one's like assessing what it does before they run it. Like, I mean, that's a broader problem with all of
Yeah,
open source usage.
yeah.
And I'm
That reminds me of like the old days where the free tools to rip CDs or
yeah,
DVDs,
yeah, yeah.
right? Like it
Yeah,
had
yeah,
a
yeah.
it had
You
a
find it on
bot in
some
it. Yeah,
sketchy site that's full of
yeah,
ads, and that's where you download it
totally.
from.
Yeah,
Yeah. Do
yeah.
you remember what was that site, SourceForge? I think.
SourceForge,
I think they're
yeah.
still around, but
Well,
yeah,
and Packet Storm and like all the old school hacker ones, right? Like,
yeah. There's just so yeah. So like you're taking a chance every time you run one of these things that
yeah,
you're not that hasn't been compromised or popped in some way. And then you're kind of like then you're taking this code that again you haven't assessed that you found on GitHub that like was published like a week ago, and then you're connecting it to all your most sensitive data sources,
yeah.
like your email, your Google Drive, your all your company documents, and like and then okay, so like that's bad enough, but then now you're also then like I mean even if that was all secure, like even if you did kind of vet the code and like
Yeah.
you connected it well and all that stuff, and you made sure it only had access to what it needed to have access to, you fundamentally have this problem that like at the core of this you have a black box LLM,
Yeah.
right? That like, and this may get better again. Like I'm not the like expert on like AI model development and like what's gonna come down in the future, but at least today, like it's fundamentally a black box,
Yeah.
and as good as it gets, like it's still like can make mistakes, and you're letting this thing basically like take commands from here and then act on it and then push data there and pull data from here and like
Yeah.
and it's just like no one really knows like what it's going to do. And the thing is, you look at, I mean, you just poke these systems a little bit, like, and you see that like no one's checking for this stuff. So like in Gmail, for instance, I saw a recent example where somebody got an email and they clicked the little summarize button,
Yeah.
and then like in the email there was like white text on a white background that said, your Gmail account's been hacked.
Yeah.
Call this 1-800 number, and like that was the summary of the email that came up. And so there's really basic attacks, like
Oh yeah.
like we're moving so fast, like people aren't even like trying to stop it,
Yeah. Well, and like prompt injection and all, like there's that whole class of AI attacks where you feel that, this is just like we're in this in between period between like really exciting, super fast moving technology and it becoming something that's like trustworthy and stable for the enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, and it's interesting that you bring up MCP servers because it seems like MCP servers like kind of solved a bunch of problems not a lot of people were having and like created a whole new class of them, right? And like when you talk to engineering managers and people who are responsible for big development groups, like the consistent, it was interesting because I've been pinging folks being like, hey, is vibe coding causing security problems for you? And like the answer was consistently like, not really. I mean, people are more productive. We review more code, but it's not like we're YOLOing this stuff right into prod, right? Like there's still a code review process. There's an SDLC. We have tools. We do linting, blah, 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 blah. But what they said is, where we're actually getting problems is around the MCP servers because people don't want to go through the headache of getting a new service stood up in production, right? Because that involves design review and there's a whole process around it. So they're basically just like on their home PCs, taking credentials home, writing MCP servers locally, doing stuff, and then seeing some way that they can get that back into production, right?
That scares me so much.
Right,
I mean,
and that seems to be
yeah.
like that's where there's a potential problem.
Yeah. No, I mean, just this week there were a bunch of NPM packages that were compromised, and like the first thing they did was like search the entire system for these tokens just sitting around on
Yeah.
disk, like for someone to pick up, right?
Totally,
Yeah,
totally.
they're just like sitting there for
Yeah.
for the taking.
Yeah, I mean, and so that's like I think it's interesting, right? Because, and this is like if you want a really great example of how to not get invited to speak at a security conference, lead with saying that things are getting better, because it just doesn't sell security products, right? But like I think in general, because you've been in this ecosystem for a long time, and I've been in it longer than I'd like to admit, and like it does actually seem like we've made a lot of progress. Like if you're using reputable cloud service providers, if you're building on languages that have a lot of security already built in, if you're using the litany of tools that are out there, including Socket, it feels like, and if you're doing vibe coding in a way where it's still part of your SDLC, there is code review and it's going through your review process, like it still feels like you're pretty secure compared to like the way it used to be.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious because you live at the forefront of like your customers are all doing that, They're all secure. They're all doing the best, right? You live at the top end. Like, how are hackers working around that? Like, it seems like vibe coding becomes a bit of like an asymmetric benefit to someone who's trying to intrude, right? Now you've got infinitely many monkeys with infinitely many typewriters, and they have the ability to launch these new attacks to get around this stuff. I'm just kind of curious, like, what are you seeing happening on that ecosystem?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's honestly not as much. I mean, what do I want to say here? I think it's the vibe coding stuff is part of it, but it's also just the bread and butter, like security best practices. I mean, to bring it a little bit back to Socket somewhat, there was a recent NPM supply chain attack that I just mentioned, where you basically had a phishing email come in pretending to be NPM, and a bunch of people just clicked the link and put in their password and gave it to the attackers. The attackers then now have credentials to publish supply chain attacks into those packages, and then it just kind of spread virally, and there was a whole bunch of other packages that have been compromised since. And like, how does MCP servers play into that? How do agents play into that? Like, not really. Like, I mean, like they made it a little easier to steal certain tokens that were just sitting around on disk, like we talked about. But no, I mean, fundamentally, like, it's just, if you have like you said, if you have a secure SDLC, if all your commits and your code review is happening and it's going through the same pipeline, then like, I mean, like, that, you're doing a pretty good job. The only thing I'll say is, there's these ways that people can kind of bypass and go around it. And like you said, it's when they're running MCP servers locally, they're taking tokens home, or when they, I think about the endpoint a lot, actually. So when people let these agents loose on their local system, they're often like installing a bunch of third-party components and running stuff that like hasn't been vetted. And by the time you do get into, a GitHub workflow, or you do run your, linting and your scanning and all that kind of stuff, well, your local system's already been compromised, and you can do quite a lot of damage with just that, right? So I think that, like, it's like yes and no, right? Like, if prod will be protected in that case, but who knows, like, what sensitive stuff's on that developer machine. And so there's still quite a lot of damage you can do in some cases.
I was talking to a very paranoid founder, probably more paranoid than most security people, building a really interesting company, blah, 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 blah. Like, it's a very important company. And he was just convinced he had to turn off email for everyone but like a few people that needed outbound access. Because it's just so consistently the case that, like, it's email, it's someone clicking on a link, and then that just kind of unwinds your whole thing, right? Like, it's just always funny that always seems to be like where everything falls down, is where you have like humans making this judgment on like the veracity of a message.
But that's the interesting part, because the agents, the more this stuff gets rolled out, like they're going to be serving that role of the human, making the judgment call, and they're like, they kind of are fallible in the same way that humans are in some sense.
I don't know. I found them to be really, really good at spotting fraud. Like, I've taken like more sophisticated phishing messages and posted them into like ChatGPT, for example. And just been like, is this?
That's a good point. Yeah,
and they're just like 100% like, oh yeah, it's malicious. And it's just like, I feel like there's like, I know this is weird to say, but like at some point these things will be little guardian angels, right? Like, I feel like these things will sit on our shoulders and just be like, no, that's stupid.
Yeah, no, that's the hope, right?
That's the hope, right? And I think you're starting to see that materialize at some level. Like, the vibe coding stuff very much feels like the beginning of that. And like, of course, like, security always comes after bad stuff happens, right? You don't get you don't get seatbelts until after a car accident. But like, we're getting enough stuff now where it feels like we're starting to get better on it. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
This is not a talk accepted at DEF CON.
No, I think you're kind of right. But I just worry the more we like sort of take ourselves out of the loop. Like, I don't know. I mean, this is maybe a more general point, but the people in my life are starting to, they just like put stuff into, like ask a question to an AI tool. And it's the kind of question that you kind of know it's not going to do a good job of that answer. Like, it involves like pulling in a ton of data, doing a bunch of math on it. And they're just asking like the free ChatGPT tier, and they're like, and they're just blindly trusting it. And I'm like,
they're like day trading stocks or something.
They're like, oh, it said it's going to go up. It's like, totally. but just think a little bit about like what, so yes and no. I kind of feel like, I don't know, but I think broadly you're right. I mean, this stuff is going to get better, and then we're gonna have like, especially if it becomes cheap enough to deploy a ton of these like agents that just watch other agents. Then you can have like almost like like a bureaucracy, like an org chart of like,
The Politburo of
yeah,
agents.
right. I mean, that's kind of what we actually do today
Yeah.
in Socket for cost reduction. Believe it or
Yeah.
not, like you don't want to scan everything with the most expensive model right away because that's cost prohibitive, and it's gonna you don't want to spend like $50 analyzing like each package.
Yeah,
And so
totally.
you have like a group of 5 or 10 cheaper models,
Yeah.
the dumber models
Yeah.
that you kind of have them all assess the situation, and then if enough of them raise their hands, then it like gets escalated to the smarter,
Wow.
to their manager basically, right?
Yeah.
So you see this kind of architecture quite a lot, and so I don't know, maybe that's the future.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I think as the cost of inference goes down, I think those dumb bots get smarter, right? Like,
Mhm.
and eventually at the top probably sits some sort of thing that represents AGI when we get there. Who knows? Right?
Yeah.
It's
Well, you talk to
interesting.
all AI companies a lot more than I do, and I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, do you buy into the like, it's going to get good enough that it solves security, or do you think we're always going to need the seatbelts?
I think that security is always going to be a challenge. I think I think eventually the long-term solve is that the technical security issues get solved far and away. Like I think these things stop making coding mistakes that have historically plagued us, combined with languages are just more secure now. You don't have to do
Memory
memory
safe.
management, memory safe, right? Like, so I think that solves it. But the the thing with security is that there's the other side of the equation, which is the attacker. And I think as long as you have people looking to find ways to exploit these systems, there will always need to be some kind of security. Now, I think the role will change as it has over the last 20 years. And I think the role probably will shrink. And I think over time, if you take a long enough view of this, like security is still very much an immature market. And you can generally measure maturity of a market by whether or not the insurance markets function
Mm.
for it. And like largely, cybersecurity insurance became a wealth transfer mechanism for ransomware authors for
Mm.
a while there. And it seems like it's correcting. Um, so I think as that market matures and cyber insurance becomes something that's mature, that's when security becomes mature. It becomes a standards game. I think you probably see lawyers taking more forefront. But as long as there will be attackers that can be successful in what they do, there will always need to be a role for someone on the security side,
Hmm.
right? And it's just you just don't have. It's the only technology market where you have that sort of an adversarial relationship, and that's kind of the engine that's been driving all the growth all these years.
Hmm.
So I think largely the really nasty problems get solved, but like people clicking on the wrong link or humans making the wrong
Hmm.
decision, and it's going to essentially become a game of, to your point, with the white text on the white background, it will become tricking the machines.
Hmm.
But I think that for the foreseeable future, at least for the extent to which I see myself working, there will be humans in
It
the
won't
loop.
be your problem after that, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it will probably because I'd be a victim of the crime, but I think for the foreseeable future, there's humans in the loop, and I think like it seems to be a really incredible thing that we're building. I'm generally very positive on
Hmm.
it, and I think that we it's just I think of the for me the vibe coding stuff is just expanding the number of developers in your organization, and some of them are probably a little bit more junior, and so
Hmm.
you need to just do a little bit better job of guardrails around that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
I think that's what happens. But who knows? They could find AGI next week, and we're all out of a job. Who
Hmm.
knows?
Yeah. That's actually why it makes it's so fun to
Yeah.
be doing this right now.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, it's funny you were saying that when you saw GPT-4, you were like, that was the moment, right? That
Yeah.
flipped, and I was like, I think that was around the time you raised your round, right?
Yep. Yep. Well, actually, we got it. We tried it. We actually tried our kind of whole approach with GPT 3.5.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, this is not good. Like this
Yeah.
doesn't work. It doesn't know. Like it thinks everything's malicious because it's being led too much by the prompt.
Totally.
It's like, oh yeah, that seems bad. That seems bad.
Yeah.
And then we got early access to GPT 4, and
Yeah.
that was the moment because it was like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
Okay, this is okay, and you can see the
Yeah.
step change, and you're like, okay, yeah, we're gonna bet on this.
Well, and it was funny because we were having, I'd say as a team, similar to you guys, very much involved with a lot of this stuff. And we see a lot of stuff before a lot of other people do. And it's just like, as we were seeing the stuff coming out of OpenAI, and then eventually the stuff coming out of Cursor, it was just like, wow, okay, this is a game changer. And then,
Mhm.
and then you engage in these discussions with the broader community, and people are like sort of curmudgeoningly
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
oh, it's not real. It's just, and you're just sort of like, well, actually,
Yeah.
this stuff's kind of amazing.
they'll come around
Yeah.
soon enough. Yeah.
So obviously you've been building Socket for a while now, and you live in this interesting space, which is sort of while code is being developed, while all these things are happening, you are sort of in the middle of this transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to get your thoughts on like it feels like even if these systems solve the underlying technology problems around coding and they make safe code, which I think is a safe bet to make, there's still security problems, right? Because there are attackers that are adulterating packages. People are trying to sneak stuff into your supply chain. Like, how do you see that, like, from a product perspective? Where do you see this kind of charting
Mm-hmm.
out and mapping to?
Yeah. Well, today the main way that Socket helps companies that are using vibe coding to actually do that securely is they use Socket as a real-time source of information about like the state of the third-party dependencies that they're bringing in. So if you think about it like this, models are trained every 3 to 6 months on, a bunch of data, and then they're kind of baking in their knowledge at that point in time. And yes, they can, reach out and like do searches and things like that, or use tools or use MCP servers to do different tasks. But like out of the box, you take one of these vibe coding tools and they don't really have any concept of like what is the security status of this component or that component. So if something was backdoored yesterday, right, do they know that? Like the answer today is no, right? And generally this is not a problem most of the time because stuff doesn't get backdoored that often, but when it does, right, that's when that real-time information can be really valuable. So Socket's out there like going and getting that info, cataloging all the open source code, and then you can get that hooked in directly to the vibe coding workflows for developers, and then you don't have to worry about when the model was trained or like what they know about the package. It also, by the way, it also helps not just with security but like code quality. I mean, one thing we see is something gets deprecated, it's not recommended to be used anymore. You're supposed to use a different package. The models don't necessarily know that. They just trained on a whole bunch of examples from Stack Overflow or GitHub or whatever, and so they'll just keep using that old code, and so you end up with some tech debt and some other kinds of just longer term just crusty code in there that wouldn't necessarily be there if you had used Socket to kind of go and pull that info in real time.
Change control will still be an issue even when the AI is writing the code, right?
Mm-hmm.